Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.
Welcome to Public Affairs. If you were the mayor instead of Brandon Johnson, what are the two key issues that he's facing that you'd be facing?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Jeff. The two key issues. First one, crime. We're all aware of what's going on in the city. Big one that we need to focus on. The other item is education. The fact that 10%, maybe 20% of CPS graduates are literate on a math and reading scale. Like, we need to be populist about that. That's how is anybody excited about that? So if he can focus on just two things as mayor, those things would help the city to go a long way.
So we're taping this on June 26th. That's actually 7 weeks to the day since Brandon Johnson became mayor of the city of Chicago. What has he done? What has he done? Has he said what you said? Hey, the two main things I got to really focus on, crime and education. Has he said that?
I can't say we've seen him take much action on it if he has. So I know that just today, we'll come back to it, but they allowed 5% property tax increase to go through from the Chicago Public Schools Board. So is he really tackling education? Are we figuring out how to better educate our students? Are we figuring out how to keep our citizens safe? I don't think he's taken action on any of them. As an officer in the Navy Reserves, our policemen and women are the ones that really put themselves in harm's way. And I think it's just a travesty what's happening to them. They're having their holidays cut and they're having to spend vacation time taken away from them. They're working long shifts, many days, just because of the ineffective policies that have come from successive administrations. So we need to start with basic decency just for our police force. When you look at the structure of the police force, we have a crazy level of attrition that isn't enabling us to hire the right people to keep our city safe. So, if we could look at policies from enabling us to hire police officers from outside of the city. That could be one thing, just as an idea. But we're not getting the talent in the pipeline in order to just fill the roles that we have. And if you want to talk about defunding the police, one way that you can defund is to just slowly close out the job openings and cut down the size of the force.
Are we down? Are the number of police officers down from the amount it was, the number that was maybe a year or two ago?
It definitely has got to be down, yep. If you look at what's going on and how they're not hiring at the rate of replacement. So that's a key starting point.
So are they out there recruiting? Do you know anything about that? Are they trying to get police from other cities? Are they doing, as Vallis said, try to bring back some of the retired police? Maybe they can do some things in the office working on detective type matters, get more. Vallis would say, Vallis of course came in number two, Paul Vallis, but he would say, get more of those police on the beat, out of the office.
I can't say that I've heard or seen that.
You don't know that?
No, can't say I do, no.
What's happened first month? What happened to crime? He's been there 7 weeks. You seen any data on what's happened in the first month or so of crime?
Yeah, it's data from Wirepoints as one data source has shown that crime's up 38% or so over that period. So it's not a good start for the administration.
Has he talked about that? Has anybody talked about the media, anything? Do you think, Wirepoints, and people who read Wirepoints know that, as you just said, if you look at crime overall, for the first month of the Brandon Johnson regime, relative to the first month 1 year ago, same period, same time, up 38%. Murders are down, I think, 5%, but every other major crime category up. Now, I don't know, we can't really say blame him, but is he on it? Has he realized what I just said? Is he trying to do something about it?
Does he have a plan?
No. We don't know.
I can't say that I've seen positive action on that front. I'm not sure if the everyday Chicagoan has either.
Wirepoints also put this out. Youth homicides more than doubled during his first month. A year ago, May 15th to June 11, 2022, 4 homicides. May 15 to June 11. What do we got? It looks like 9 homicides. Has he talked about that?
Where's the media outrage on that? We hear that talked about all the time, but no, that's sweep it under the rug. Next issue.
If blacks are predominantly, as we know they are, victims of homicides, they also may be predominantly Hispanics and blacks as perps,
Completely.
but also victims. I think those two groups, 95% of our victims. When we have 800 homicides, as we had in 2020, 2021 in Chicago,
Yep.
95% of those folks are minorities,
Right. Exactly.
the victims.
It's terrible. I think it's, as you think about policing policies, we used to be able to kind of target, and they would have a database that would be able to track where the violent crime is taking place, and then to apportion police out in order to kind of meet those hotspots. From my understanding, we're not even allowed to have a database like that anymore. And police are getting pulled from the precincts that they're assigned to, which is tough in itself, because now, really since Laquan McDonald, crime is spread all over the city. It used to be kind of concentrated in pockets, but if you kind of look back, it seems like a trend started about then and then really accelerated in 2020, where the crime is kind of infiltrated into the downtown areas and Lincoln Parks and the West Loops and areas that had it in the past, but has definitely seen a boom recently. So much tougher on the police.
You're a long-term resident of the city of Chicago?
14 years now. Yep.
14 years.
Yep.
You live in the West Loop?
I do.
Right?
Yep.
And live there with your daughter? Right?
Yep. Yep.
And that's the recently changed 34th Ward, is that right?
It is, yeah. With the great redistricting and kind of looking at the gerrymandering, if we want to talk about a beautiful amount of gerrymandering, the 34th Ward stretches all the way from West Loop all the way down to the South Loop and lots of places in between. So it's an interesting amalgamation of neighborhoods.
So you're the 28th Ward Chicago committee, 28th Ward Republican committeeman, but that's because of the redistricting.
That's
You'll
right.
be presumably soon the 34th Ward Republican committeeman.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the intention.
All right. And you know your committeeman, right? Who's that?
The alderman?
Alderman, excuse me.
I do, yeah. Alderman Conway and I serve in the Navy together, so it's a good connection to be able to kind of understand what's going on at the city council level. But yep, it's a fun connection on that front.
So it's interesting because I assume you've seen him since Brandon Johnson became mayor. You've had one of these trips up to where your naval reserves are. Where are they?
Port Sheridan.
You do that once a month, right?
Yep, one weekend a
Sometimes more
month
frequently?
and 2 weeks a year roughly, depending. Give more or take a little bit of that, but yeah.
You're an intelligence officer, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And so you talked with Alderman Conway, right? Who ran for state's attorney.
Yep,
When did you run? It was 4 years ago? Was
4
that
years ago, yep.
In almost 4 years ago, 2020.
2020, yep. I think the first thing is you need to empower the police to get back out and do their job. I believe there's a sentiment that I've felt and talked to many police officers that it's very difficult to get out and do their job right now with the policies that are hampering them and with the fear of public retribution on the various trouble that's happened with, Laquan McDonald and others around. So there's a fear in the police force that, hey, I don't want that to be on me. And you have to feel for our men and women in uniform, because that's very hard to get out and do the job that they do, putting their life on the line every day, and then maybe having the public behind you and maybe not. There's bad actors in every line of business, but if you look at the police force, by and large, you have people that want to serve, people that are good in our communities, people that you would want to be neighbors with.
Post-COVID, Wirepoint says, crime was up, 40%?
Yep.
40% overall. Murder was down that particular year, down 15%. But that's like from 800 modern high
Right.
to more than 700.
Yeah.
Not too 4 years ago, we were at like 500.
Yep.
So that's 200 more homicides.
That's just unacceptable in the first place. The fact that it's down, can we be excited that it's down? Yes, but it's even at that level, that's terrible.
Yeah,
How could any city live with that?
So
Especially our black and brown neighborhoods, where most of it's concentrated.
yeah, so Brandon Johnson came in with that. He won it was a close election, 52-48%. So the majority thought he had the answer to this, I guess.
I disagree. I don't think the majority thought that he had the answer to this. I think the majority that voted for him had other priorities in mind. And, coming from his CTU backing with, how much funds were coming from those members, I think they had different priorities for the city. So maybe he just had to talk about it, but I don't think it's actually a priority of his. And just as we talked about in the open, across the first 7 weeks, we can't really say that we've seen much by way of traction from the Johnson administration on that front.
So Do you have to get this out somehow? Do you have to get the word out? This high rate of growth, high rate of crime, maybe still isn't known. That's the first step. If you're going to fix a problem, know what your problem is. I mean, maybe a lot of people don't know what Wirepoints knows, that Chicago has had the nation's second highest homicide rate of the 20 biggest cities in 2022. I think only Philadelphia is higher. Rate of homicide, not just total number of homicides, which they're also high on. Okay. So you've seen stuff on the arrest rate. The arrest rate's 5%. Right?
Yeah.
Overall, for all major crimes.
Right.
Higher for homicides, something like 30%. For shootings, it's like 5%. So as Vallis used to say, hey, if you get shot, we're not going to find the guy. You got to get killed. Right. I mean,
and even probably still won't find him then.
Do you think if Brandon Johnson were talking about this conversation, as we have for the last 10 minutes, think that would help?
I'm pretty sure with the policies that he has come into office with, we wouldn't be any better off than we are right now.
Because he doesn't know. What would you tell him if you were hopeful he might listen to you? Other than more police, more support for police, what about the courts?
Yeah, well, on that front,
the state's attorney, how do
we
they
could talk
come
about
into
the
this?
Cook County State's Attorney at length for days. So,
but in a nutshell, what's the problem with Kim Foxx?
Yeah, the big thing that we're seeing is we're not getting the prosecutions. So Kim Foxx, George Soros funded, has decided that she's just going to unilaterally not prosecute crime. And if we're not prosecuting criminals, how are we ever going to set what is right and wrong values and morality in our society? So if we're not putting criminals, if we're not processing criminals as they are, treating criminals as they are, and working with them to say, you've broken the law, now you're going to suffer the consequences, then how are we ever going to have a basis of society that respects one another? So she's completely ripped it apart. And that's what Soros and his backing of state's attorneys around the country has really turned into. They're really trying to tear society apart at its seams so they can reconstruct it in the Sorosian-minded way.
So you think Fox realizes that's the result of her policies? Or is she just doing that because she thinks maybe we prosecute the wrong people, maybe we're too harsh on people, first-time offenders? You ever have a sense, why is Kim Foxx doing this? It said that she charges after the arrest at 3 times lower the rate of her predecessors. If that's true, why would she do that?
I think, you kind of led into it a little bit. Some of it is they feel that there needs to be more restorative justice and that we're not doing good by way of people and helping them become good members of society. And that's one worldview, but when you look at the violent crime that most of them are committing and then just letting them right back out, or not even finding them, not even bringing them to trial, we're not even getting there in the first place. So I think, across her political agenda that she's trying to achieve, and she's also achieving her way of restorative justice by taking no action.
She doesn't think that if you don't prosecute these people, you might have more, these people, meaning the people who are committing the crimes, the major crimes. If you don't prosecute the murderers, if you don't prosecute the rapists, if you don't prosecute, we had carjackings go up 2019 to 21 from like 600 one year, 2 years later to 1,800. Do you think maybe the people doing the carjackings, many of whom were young people,
minors,
thought they weren't going to get prosecuted if they got caught? First, you got to catch them. She doesn't think prosecuting them might cause fewer of these individuals to engage in carjackings, car theft.
I think she's going to argue that they were born into circumstances and that woe is them for being born into some circumstances. And we have a heart and we need to do things for people. And I think economic development can go a long way on that. But when you don't prosecute crime and when you don't set the example of what is right and wrong, and we are a nation of laws, when you don't abide by those laws, how are we going to have a functioning society?
So in short, talked about prosecution. Talked about a prosecutor who doesn't want to prosecute. We haven't talked about Tim Evans, right? He's a problem here.
He's completely a problem,
What's the problem with him?
I think it goes the same way, all the way up to the Cook County level. So,
So he doesn't want to detain people. No cash bond.
No cash bond. Let them out.
Let them out. Even though people are, it's like a revolving door, they're they're convicted, and then you catch them again after they did a short time. Maybe they just did probation, no time.
Right.
Maybe they were paroled.
Yep.
Tim Evans has a lot to say about that. He's the chief judge in Cook County,
Yep.
oversees 800 judges,
Yep.
has something to say about people being detained
Yep.
while they're waiting for trial,
Right.
so they're not committing crimes.
Yeah.
So what do you do? You're the you're the Chicago GOP
Yep.
policy director.
Right.
Are you out there talking? Because they're only 20% of we estimate 20% of some of the residents are
somewhat joke that we're
Republicans.
the largest interest group in Chicago. Now, sometimes we're the neglected interest group, but I think what I would want people to know is that the Chicago GOP is alive and we're kicking. And under the leadership of Chair Steve Bolton, Steve has really brought in a bold and ambitious plan, and our job is to we don't have to talk about things happening at the national stage. We can focus on what's happening here in the city and just be normal. We can say that crime is bad and what's happening in our communities isn't right. The way that our kids are being educated is terrible. And how could we send our kids to CPS with what they're producing? How are we wasting so much of our resources to get so little result? You know, when I take it and put my consulting hat on and we look at it across any angle, you know, we are wasting so much money and producing terrible results for our kids.
But it did go up 40%
Yep.
in the last 4 years.
That's right.
So from 20,000 per kid per year to 28,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we're spending a lot. Wirepoints says CPS spends the second most per student out of the nation's 50 largest districts.
Yep.
So we're not comparing them with some small district.
Right.
The largest district. They're the second most, I think, only to New York.
Yep.
Okay. And I think at the time, this may be old data like 2017, so I think it's 17,000. Maybe that's also just operating costs in 2017. I don't know. But that was the second highest.
Yep.
So shouldn't be a matter of we need to spend more.
They're getting plenty of money.
Well, how is the performance at CPS? Give us some idea. What do you think?
Well, as we look, you know, the anywhere between 10 and 20% of black and brown people graduating from CPS, theoretically, graduating, aren't literate based on anywhere from 4th to 12th grade, depending on where you measure it. So reading and math.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, reading, writing, math. So as you look at that statistic and as you see what's happening, are we really preparing people to be successful in America today? Are we preparing people to be successful in Chicago today? And arguably, not even arguably, the statistics are clear. The answer is no. So we're doing a terrible disservice to these kids and spending all this money, and we're not getting the results. So, you know, it's kind of insane.
What's the number? Let's just get that clear. For black CPS students,
Yep.
2022, what percentage of those students read at grade level?
I believe
across
the
the
number that I remember was about 10%.
10%.
Yep.
Now, I know Wirepoints and others have raised this, and CPS has come back and said, well, like all school districts across the country,
Yep.
we were hurt by the pandemic.
Of course.
But what was it pre-pandemic, like in 2019?
I think it was like 17% or not too much higher. Yeah.
So somebody needs to call them out on that,
Yeah.
because that isn't true. It wasn't like it was 50% and it went down to 10.
Yep.
It was 17% and it went down to 11.
Right.
Yes, it got worse.
Yep.
But were they happy? Was the superintendent of CPS, was he happy with 17% of the kids overall who were black reading at grade level? I mean, isn't that a shameful statistic?
We need to be a little populist about that. That is just terrible. I don't know how anybody can be excited about, you know, their theoretical 83% graduation rates, but if we're not producing people who can become good and productive citizens in our society, then how can we be proud about that? How can we be proud of spending all this money?
So what would you do if
Yep.
you really were the mayor and you came in first day? What would you do? We talked about crime.
Yep.
What would you do about education at CPS?
Well, as we kind of look at CPS in the first place, so you got a whole bunch of buckets. I mean, I could take you all the way from big, crazy harebrained theory. Valis, I think, raised a good one on your show of, you know, perhaps we just need to break CPS into smaller districts. And that's something that we've explored as kind of a public policy idea. So that could be one approach. I think there needs to be a permanent standing commission on school openings and closings. So as kids leave areas, as families leave areas and schools become under-resourced and don't have enough kids to function, I think we need to evaluate that on a more permanent basis.
We have a lot of those schools that are way underutilized. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. With the outflow of migration that we've seen in the States, obviously, we've had 100 plus thousand, I think, over the last decade was the flows. We're losing kids at a pretty fast clip.
36%, I think, Wirepoints says, of the traditional schools, not counting charters, which may be doing better,
Yep.
are less than a half full.
Yep.
Some are like 5%.
Yep.
Some are spending, we got the analysis of these underutilized schools are spending $56,000 per kid per year because they keep the teachers there even though many of the students have left, almost all the students. So one of those is 0% learning how to read at grade level, even though they're spending $56,000 per kid per year.
Yep.
So don't you have to call attention to that? If you were the mayor, first day, tell people, blacks, what are you getting? Well, 10% of black students reading at grade level, 17% of Hispanic students. Don't you have to get like a crash program?
It's terrible, and I feel for those families. And the other aspect on that is those families are kind of trapped in their circumstances. So you have these already failing schools, and you won't let the dollars associated with education for a child follow the child to another school. So a lot of these families are stuck in these neighborhoods that that maybe parents would choose something different. So why aren't we empowering parents to go and make the choices for their children? I gave you the example for me, I live on the wrong side of a street, so I can't send my daughter to the school that I would like to send her to, which is a CPS school, by the way. But because I live on the wrong side of the street in a different zip code, she cannot go to that school. Even though it's closer to me than any other school, I'm in the wrong zip code. So why do we trap people that way? Why do we not let parents choose where is best for their kids and have the dollars follow them? So I'm fortunate in that through my career and what I've been able to do, I can send my daughter to many private schools, and unfortunately, that's the choice we're going to make as a result of this. But not many families have that same opportunity, and why aren't we mad about that?
Yeah, what do we call that?
School choice.
School choice.
Yeah.
So you would take, if we're spending, as I said, or Wirepoint says let's say $29,000 per kid per year.
Yep.
That includes all the costs. All the expenditures, the local taxes, the federal revenue, the state revenue, the whole thing, 29,000. If we could just take that 29,000 and say to the parents, here's a voucher, spend it, it's good just for education, $29,000 at the school of your choice. What choices would they have here in Chicago? Some of the choices you think before even knew. Well, what choices would they have currently?
Well, I
don't mean specific schools, but where could they go to leave CPS if they wanted
so you're talking like charter schools and other opportunities there, private schools?
Well, CPS is a public school. It's part of CPS. It's not a traditional school.
Right.
But yeah, they could take them out of a traditional school and go to a charter school. Or they could do, as you say, they could leave the school that was even a traditional school at CPS, but go to one that you thought was better. So they could move them around within the public schools.
That's right.
They could go to a charter school. You have other choices?
Well, at least through that way, you get some measure of choice. And then the schools that are seeing attrition and enrollment drop, then with the dollars following the kids, then maybe that's a hint that something's wrong with that school.
Would you give them a choice to go to the private school of their choice? Take that voucher and go there?
I think that should be an option for parents if they want that. Yeah.
Because then in your business, you're a strategy consultant dealing with mergers and acquisitions. You compete with other firms, right?
All the time.
Competition is good?
Competition is a great thing.
So these parents would have that choice, that purchasing power, private school, sectarian, non-sectarian.
Yeah.
You think that might help?
I think parents in those communities would just jump at that opportunity. But unfortunately, with CTU and Brandon Johnson and others in office, we're not going to get there. So it's disheartening and it's sad. And you got to feel for those families because they're really trapped in circumstances that we could otherwise just snap our fingers and fix to give those kids so much more opportunity.
Yeah, why? What's the problem with Brandon Johnson? Why wouldn't he think, hey, choice sounds good, competition, things get better. Maybe the schools who can teach kids, Black, Hispanic, and others, how to read. And so we don't have 10%, we got 20%, 40%, 50% reading at grade level. He wouldn't say that's a good thing?
I think the mayor would say that, and along with his, CTU upbringing and CTU backing, that the teachers want more money in the schools that they're at, and we shouldn't have to close any schools, and that we should just stay right in the communities where we are and not do anything different than what we're doing. Just give us more money.
And so, as we wind this up, what can you do? You're the Chicago GOP policy director.
Yeah, so it all comes down to we have an important role to play when you think about what it takes to drive change. And one aspect of driving change, we fall back to the 3 Ps. You've got the process, which we obviously don't control. We have no elected power. You have the politics, which we can influence a little bit. But, by and large, like I said, we're a large interest group with 20% if we're able to turn out our voter base on certain issues or certain candidates. And then the third piece is the policy. And our job is to be so radically normal and talk about policies that everyday Chicagoans would say, well, yeah, that's a bright idea. Why aren't we doing that? And I think our job, as we kind of see it, at least from the policy angle, is to make sure that we're trying to inject that normalcy into the flow of conversation, because the media is certainly not bringing it there. So our job, however we can do it, is to bring common, reasonable policies that everyday Chicagoans would understand and say, yeah, that's a great idea. Why aren't we doing it?
So we're talking here on June 26th. 2 days later, some of this people might see it after our discussion after that CPS board meeting. But at that board meeting, my understanding is they seem to need more money, even though it seems
they
like
proposed
there's less
5% increase on property taxes.
Apologies.
Yeah, I wasn't
even
sure
though
where you were
Brandon
leading
Johnson, he ran on, he wasn't going to raise property taxes.
He did run on that, yeah. We've seen some good Twitter that, hey, I will not raise property taxes.
And what are we hearing from him right now?
My understanding is what we're hearing is that he's saying, well, I didn't appoint these people into their positions, so I can't really control that, so not me.
Hands off. He's not trying to stop it.
Nope, not my problem.
It's a lot of money, whatever it is. Property tax is going to be hitting people across the board, right?
That's right.
A lot of middle-class people, a lot of maybe even low-income people may have scraped together, they've got a house, they're going to pay higher property taxes.
That's right, yeah. And even if you don't own a house, if you're renting,
through your rent, you're going to have, because
everybody's going to pay somewhere.
Right, because your rent will go up because your owner's going to have higher taxes.
They will, and they have to cover their costs.
What would you do? You wouldn't agree. If you were the mayor, would you be out there cajoling the board, telling the board this is a mistake?
Absolutely.
And what would you tell the board to do?
Well, first I'd want to know, why do we need that additional revenue? Where are these funds going to? We already had the conversation about all the money that's going into public schools. Well, how's it being spent? If we just take a zero-based budgeting look at it, which is kind of a consulting technique of starting at zero and then building up and justifying every single cost that we're expending, are we happy with the result of what we're getting? And if not, why don't we make a change? And perhaps if we need that money, then should we be looking elsewhere and reapportioning from other areas?
So take other areas, cut there without hurting the quality, which the quality now is 10% of blacks, 17% of Hispanics reading.
Can't really hurt the quality too much more. It's not really there.
We're almost out of time. So we hope you'll come back, folks, because we've had as our guest Chris Myers. He is the Chicago GOP Director of Public Policy.
That's right.
You know this stuff. You're working to get, crime down in Chicago, education better. Next time we can address more how you deal with the fiscal issues.
We could talk about the real estate transfer tax that they want to pass. There's lots of things out there for us.
All right. So you come back, Chris Myers. You come back to Public Affairs.